A pharmaceutical facility can operate with perfect mechanical precision. The bioreactors maintain exact temperatures. The filling lines hit every volume target. Yet this same flawless physical system can trigger a devastating regulatory shutdown. The vulnerability exists because regulators operate on a strict absolute. If an action is missing from the documentation, it is treated as an action that never occurred. A single missing signature or an untracked deviation quickly scales into severe consequences. It begins with regulatory warning letters, escalates to immediate product recalls, and culminates in full plant shutdowns. To survive an audit, engineers must stop treating validation as an administrative chore. This animated blueprint illustrates a secure validation system. It requires constructing documentation as a rigorous three-layer data architecture: foundation, execution, and integrity. Preventing an audit failure means building this documentation structure so that it inherently resists common compliance vulnerabilities from the ground up. We start at the bottom of the data cube, the foundation layer, anchored by the User Requirement Specification, or URS. When URS statements are poorly defined or lack measurable parameters, the base of the validation is compromised. To secure this, we construct a traceability matrix. Glowing nodes mathematically connect URS lines to specific testing protocols. If this matrix lacks links, the system breaks, leaving disconnected testing nodes floating without context. A common way this foundation is corrupted is the repetitive use of outdated templates. Reusing a document without modifying it introduces irrelevant data, references the wrong equipment, and immediately destroys the credibility of the protocol. Conversely, unnecessarily dense documents introduce their own risks. Needlessly complicated validation paperwork simply increases the likelihood of human error during execution. If these foundational requirements are vague, mathematically unlinked, or copied from obsolete processes, the entire validation system collapses before a single physical test is run. We move to the execution layer. Here, testing parameters must be dictated by a formalized risk assessment. This flowchart maps the framework, routing red, yellow, and green data streams into discrete testing blocks based on risk factors. Failing to document a thorough risk assessment removes the logical basis for the test itself. An auditor views any testing that lacks documented risk justification as arbitrary. Success in this layer is defined by strict acceptance criteria. Watch as the parameters tighten from subjective text into precise numeric tolerances. Criteria must be highly specific, measurable, and attainable. Defining acceptance criteria that are too broad or subjective strips the test of its meaning. If the benchmark for success is not clearly quantified, the testing phase proves nothing to an inspector. Execution without quantified risk and measurable criteria is blind activity, completely devoid of scientific proof. Process execution rarely matches the blueprint perfectly. Deviations and testing failures are normal, expected occurrences during the qualification process. The regulatory threat is not that a deviation occurred. The threat is how it is managed. An improperly handled, undocumented, or hidden deviation is a severe compliance risk. Every deviation requires a mandatory structural response. This logic loop shows a red deviation triggering a thorough root cause analysis, which then mandates the implementation of a corrective and preventive action, or CAPA, locking in green. There is also a human element to execution. Even a perfectly executed test and resolved deviation are entirely invalidated if the personnel performing the validations lack properly documented training and competency records. A thoroughly documented deviation resolved by a CAPA proves to an auditor that the system is under control. An ignored deviation proves systemic negligence. Finally, the top tier of our cube locks into place. This is the integrity layer, which seals and protects all the data below it. Data integrity is fragile, easily compromised by overwriting data or missing timestamps. To secure the record, we apply the Alcoa Plus framework. As the system scans the cube, 5 verification nodes light up: attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. This layer also governs version control. Utilizing outdated documents, breaking the chain of revisions, or maintaining multiple uncontrolled copies are direct regulatory violations. When a system or piece of equipment undergoes a change, the validation documentation must be updated immediately. Failing to link documentation updates with change control systems leaves the facility operating on obsolete qualifications. As facilities adopt digital transformation, electronic records introduce specific challenges. Companies must strictly adhere to regulations like 21 CFR Part 11, ensuring robust data security and locked, unalterable audit trails. Without strict adherence to Alcoa Plus principles and rigorous digital version control, the underlying foundation and execution data cannot be trusted by any regulatory agency. Quality assurance is not a separate department running parallel to this process. As shown here, QA acts as the final, translucent verification shield that envelops and locks down the entire validation architecture. Documents approved through cursory review, missing signatures, or invalid workflows allow material deficiencies to slip into production. But this rotating, fully assembled model illustrates the required standard. A secure system relies on precise foundations, risk-based criteria, strict Alcoa Plus integrity, and rigorous QA verification. We return to our initial axiom: excellent physical machinery means nothing without the flawless data architecture required to prove it works. Validation documentation provides the definitive, lasting evidence of a facility's consistency. It is the final proof of control and the ultimate commitment to patient safety.